Today we are going to be discussing speciation. Before we begin, we should clarify what the word species means. Species are a group of living organisms capable of exchanging genes or interbreeding, which are reproductively isolated from other groups. Speciation is when groups become different enough in form and behavior that individuals from one group no longer mate with individuals from the other, which forms new genetically distinct species that have evolved from the main population. There are two specific types of speciation: sympatric speciation and allopatric speciation. Sympatric speciation is when new species evolve from a common ancestor when the new and old species are still inhabiting the same geographical region. However, allopatric speciation is when a new species evolves from a common ancestor due to the population being separated by a geographical barrier. In both cases, there is an initial isolating mechanism or factor, and then continued accumulation of additional random mutations over time. Let's begin with sympatric speciation. To show a specific example of sympatric speciation, let's focus on frogs. In California, there now lies two species of frogs, the California red-legged frog and the mountain yellow-legged frog. However, these two species used to be one. One plausible explanation for how they diverged into two species is that at first, in a certain area, all red-legged frogs lived amongst each other. But a mutation occurred within the population in which some red-legged frogs began to have different breeding times than the others. The frogs who had the mutation were only able to reproduce with other frogs with the mutation. This led to a new subpopulation to form. The frogs with similar breeding patterns would keep reproducing with each other. After these species diverged into different subpopulations, they would continue to develop different traits through accumulated random mutations that were specific to their population. This can be through natural selection, which is when organisms that are better suited for their environment survive. Through natural selection, these populations will gain traits which the other isolated population will not have. The population could also gain these traits through a process like genetic drift. Genetic drift is random fluctuations in allele frequencies in a population. Through this, isolated populations could become genetically distinct from the original population, also resulting in the formation of a new species. If this continues for generations, eventually they are no longer able to mate with any other populations due to the genetic differences, thus becoming a separate species, each with their own genetic fingerprint. In reality, this event did actually happen with the frogs, which resulted in the formation of the new species, the mountain yellow-legged frog. This is because, in the specific case of these frogs, the red-legged frog only bred during January until March, and the mutated frogs, which became known as the yellow-legged frogs, only bred from late March until May. Different breeding times, which is called temporal isolation, is an example of an isolating mechanism that can lead to speciation. So, using this example, we can sum up sympatric speciation as when a population inhabits the same geographical area, but an isolation mechanism, in the case of the frogs, it was breeding times, causes the species to diverge into separate populations through reproductive isolation. Next, we will focus on the other type, allopatric speciation. To refresh our memory, allopatric speciation is when a new species evolves from a common ancestor due to geographical isolation. You will notice that this is similar to sympatric in that there is an initial isolating mechanism and then an accumulation of mutations resulting in adaptations for each subgroup-specific environment. We are going to discuss two subspecies of the spotted owl, the northern spotted owl and the Mexican spotted owl. The northern spotted owl is found in northern parts of California, and the Mexican spotted owl is found in parts of Mexico and southern United States. A reasonable explanation for this divergence in location and subspecies is that they went through allopatric speciation. At first, they started as one owl population. But one day, during a hypothetical storm, some of the owls drifted across a mountain range into the southern region. This became the geographical barrier, which is the isolation mechanism, and if these owls were unable to move back and forth, reproductive isolation is set. This is because the owls who had drifted over and become separate from the main population would only be able to reproduce with each other. The populations would keep reproducing and form distinct populations. As we referred to before, through processes such as natural selection and genetic drift, the populations would be shaped into separate forms, each with different genetic makeups and traits. And that's sympatric and allopatric speciation.